So there's this weapon in Destiny 2 called the Graviton Lance, but it's not really clear what this thing actually has to do with gravitons, besides just sounding awesome. The only technical description we get in the lore is this line. Think of space-time as a tapestry on a loom. This weapon is the needle. Also, enemies which are hit by it don't really explode. They more seem to collapse inward and implode, and then nearby material gets dragged along with them. So, is this what gravitons do? Well, kind of, but not in the way you might be picturing. Gravitons are hypothetical particles that show up when you try to describe gravity using quantum field theory. If you take Einstein's equations and you look at very small ripples in space-time, and then you try to quantize those ripples the way we do in electromagnetism, they behave like a massless particle with spin too. That particle is what we call a graviton. At first glance, you might imagine something like a laser setup. But instead of firing photons, the graviton lance fires a tightly focused beam of gravitons. The first problem with this is that we can literally see the gun shoot, and it fires discrete energy bursts that behave like bullets. That already tells us that it probably isn't a beam of individual gravitons. The second, much bigger problem is that gravity is absurdly weak. Gravitons, if they exist, interact so weakly with matter that even detecting a single one of them might be fundamentally impossible. A graviton beam strong enough to do what we see in games, such as have chain reaction kills, would have to be so intense that it could completely destroy everything nearby, including the person holding the weapon. So clearly, that's not what's happening. Instead, the only explanation that actually fits both the physics and what we see in the gameplay is this. The graviton lance isn't firing gravitons at all. Well, it kind of is, but it's not the projectile. You see, in general relativity, gravity isn't really a force, it's a geometry. All objects travel in a straight line, but what is straight versus curved depends on the shape of the space that it's being traveled through. Mass and energy change the shape of space-time, and objects move according to that curved geometry. If you create a sudden, intense curvature in a very small region, different parts of an object no longer agree on which way down is. One side accelerates faster than the other. This difference is called a tidal force, and tidal forces don't push things outward like an explosion. They pull things apart from the inside. That's why enemies hit by the graviton lance don't blow up, they collapse inwards. What I think the lance really does is something closer to gravitational cavitation. It's briefly creating a region where space-time collapses inwards and then snaps back. For a fraction of a second, nearby paths through space-time are forced to converge so violently that matter can't stay intact. Different parts of the target try to follow different straight lines, and the object itself crushes from the inside. So, the graviton lance basically uses gravitons in the same way that a laser uses photons to shape an electromagnetic field, or the way cavitation uses pressure waves to collapse bubbles. You're not hitting the target, you're just making the medium itself give way. A quick back-of-the-envelope calculation says that to crush a human-sized target in milliseconds, the GR equivalent energy scale is on the order of 10 to the 27 joules, roughly 1 trillion megatons of TNT. But it's actually more nuanced than this, as this energy dissipation calculation depends a lot on the physical structure of how the bullets impact their target. Maybe in a future video I can explore in more detail of what this would actually do to you if it hit you. This also explains the chaining effect. Gravity doesn't care about charge, material, or armor, it just couples to everything. So when space-time collapses in one spot, nearby matter immediately feels that distortion too. Killing one target changes the geometry around it, destabilizing everything nearby. Importantly, this still isn't a black hole. Real black holes require absurd amounts of mass or energy, and anything capable of creating one will destroy the user instantly. What the graviton lance seems to do instead is create a very localized spike in space-time curvature, strong enough to shred matter, but short-lived enough to not tear the world apart or collapse in on itself. So the name actually does make sense. Not because the weapon fires gravitons, but because it weaponizes gravity in its most fundamental form.